Hey Josh, thanks for sitting down with me today. This is Josh Reyes. He is a climbing instructor, climbing coach here at Jacksonville. He teaches a lot out at Ad Rock, a nice micro gym out in Gadsden, and he also teaches a little bit with the JSU Climbing Club, which I'm a part of. So he's also partly my coach as well. And I'm just going to sit down and talk to him about athlete behavior today. How are you doing today?
Doing great.
All right.
Thanks for the opportunity, Nathan. Appreciate it.
Thank you for sitting down with me today. So we're just going to roll right into it with question one. How do you motivate your athletes? And do you have any other methods if they're in a poor mood to help motivate them and get them to hit that climb?
Well, for me, motivating athletes is really dependent on finding out what the athlete is all about, like making that connection with them, finding out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and their best learning methods. You know, like for me, I'm prior military. I'm a Navy submarine veteran and a diver too, and so I'm used to having people scream at me, and for me, I'm just kind of wired that way to where if I'm in a pressure situation and people are yelling at me and stuff, then that causes me to kind of rise to the occasion. Not everybody's wired like that, so that's been a learning journey as a coach, is finding out with my athletes who are the ones that I can pressure more to performance through that kind of environment because that's familiar to me, and who are the ones that need a little bit more of a softer approach with better soft skills and you know, that I like to be positive with all of my athletes, but the way that I'm positive with them, you know, if I can raise my voice at them and challenge them that way, or if I need to be a little bit more calm. You know, those are all factors that go into coaching and finding out, like, once I establish that knowledge of what their learning methods are like and the best ways to connect with them, then how best to communicate with them, build a trust relationship. That's really important, especially in the sport of climbing, because we're depending on each other, putting our lives on the line literally when we're on a rope, or when we're bouldering. You're trusting the person behind you is going to help you to land safely on the crash pads if you do happen to fail. So that trust is kind of already expected and built into climbing, but from a coaching perspective, I think it takes it to another level, because you have to get them to trust that you're taking them in a direction that's going to help them meet their goals.
All right, thank you. So when was the worst time an athlete gave you an attitude, and how did you handle that?
Oh man, I've got some stories over the years for sure on that. The worst time someone gave me an attitude, and what was the second piece?
And how did you handle their attitude?
Okay, well, in particular, this was coaching a teenage athlete, and so with that, you got, you know, the maturity isn't quite all there as it would be for like a college student like yourself. So with that, it was just kind of a generalized poor attitude, and anything that I asked the student to do, it was just immediate pushback. And it was in a coaching environment where I was coaching a lot of kids together, right? So when you have something like that and it's distracting, it's also kind of taken away from the experience of the other athletes as well. So in that sense, I tried to be encouraging and try to keep it lighthearted and let him know, hey, like, you need to get on board because this is a team environment and everybody is responsible for doing what us as coaches have laid out for everyone to do. And if you can't be a part of that experience and contribute to it, then you're not going to be allowed to continue. And so gave them several chances, and then when that wasn't working, pulled the athlete aside. I believe it's not healthy to jump on an athlete in front of everyone else, right? Because that automatically puts them in a defensive position because everybody's watching the situation unfold. You don't want that. So pulled that athlete aside, let them know what the expectations are, just reminded them of that, and said, hey, you got a choice. And it's always good to give them the choice and say, hey, if you choose this, you can continue on with us. If you choose not to, then you can't continue on with us. And on that particular day, the athlete made the right choice and chose to participate with us. It wasn't magically better, but at least they were on board with continuing with the practice that we had planned. So that's how that one went down.
All right, so praising in public, but also like taking them aside for any action that was less than favorable, so that way they're not automatically defensive in front of everyone else.
Absolutely, and I like what you said about praising in public. Praising in public is so important because we all like to be liked, we all like to be recognized, and so when we do something right, especially like in climbing, right, when you get to the top, it's pretty obvious that you've been successful, right? So it's kind of the same idea that when somebody succeeds at some training regimen that I've given them, or they've stood out and showed me like a really high level of work ethic and try hard that day, man, I'm all about praising them and praising them in public because we all like to have that recognition, right? But the flip side of that, as you pointed out, on criticizing or correcting, that shouldn't be in public unless it absolutely has to be as a last resort. So yeah, praise in public, correct in private.
All right. And on correcting in private, we sort of already talked about how you pull them to the side, but is there more method that you have to the corrective action towards bad attitudes?
Yeah, so reminding athletes of what the goals are and the expectations, making sure those are clear, that's really important when it comes to correcting someone who's not meeting that, right? Because if you show them or remind them, hey, this is what the standard is, and this is where you are today, or where you've been past week or whatever, and you're not meeting that from a behavioral standpoint, right? That's what we're talking about, correct? Okay. So when you have that mismatch of expectation versus actual behavior, well, reminding them of what those expectations are is for sure where to start, because you got to have that clear communication on this is what's expected and you're not meeting that, to get them to recognize that, right? Once you have that established, then depending on how that athlete likes to be or tends to be better at communicating with, that's where that comes into play, right? If it's somebody that I have to like get right in their face, look me in the eye and raise my voice, I'd rather not do that, but some people need that, right? Ideally, in a calm manner, keeping self-control as the coach. If I lose my cool, then I'm setting a poor example for the athlete, right? If they just take me to the brink and I blow up at them, that's a poor method of trying to get them to try to correct their behavior. So try to keep a calm, collected demeanor, be clear on my communication on what the expectations are versus their behavior, and then try an encouraging method that gives them the choice to get them to correct that behavior.
Okay. So sort of on the same line, is there any difference that you have, like if you can tell one of your athletes is just having a bad day and they're just sort of out of it, is there a way that you have for motivating that athlete versus someone who's been giving you more of a consistent bad attitude throughout the entire time?
Yes, definitely. In particular, like knowing your athletes is really critical for that, right? Because if I know who my athletes are, especially like coaching a lot of the JSU athletes or some private lessons that I've given for climbing, you need time to see what normal is for that person, right? And then once you see that pattern of this is this person's personality, and then there's a day where it's just completely not that, well, yeah, then you know something's up. And so I'll try to keep it in more of a private setting to ask them, hey, is there something else going on? Because you're not usually like this, you know? Is everything okay at home? Is your school workload like just overwhelming? You know, talk to me, because yes, I like to coach and it's near and dear to me, but as much as I like coaching climbing, I prefer coaching life, because that's way more rewarding and way more beneficial for the athlete, right? Because it helps them develop in their character as a person. So I like to let my athletes know that I'm available for them for talking about life and struggles. And hey, if you need a pair of ears to vent at, here I am. We can stop at the training and talk about what is really important. And usually that helps, where the athlete will be like, okay, yes, I've got 6 exams coming up tomorrow and I'm just not ready for them. Okay, well now I understand what the problem really is, and so that's why they're being short or really stressed out or not focused and negative. So finding out what the root of that situation is really important for dealing with a bad day. If it's just a trend of continuous bad behavior or a poor attitude, well then it usually is something deeper running, right? Like some serious circumstances, some character issues that need development. And for example, I had a really good buddy that I got into climbing, kind of a big guy, a buddy of mine from church, so we knew each other already, and he wanted to come try it out. So he came here to the house, and his first couple times, like, he couldn't even hold himself on the wall, right? And then after training, he got really psyched into it and wanted to do it more and more. But the underlying theme for him, like this continuous thread of negativity, was that he viewed climbing as either pass or fail, right? So there's no gray area in between, there's no progress. It's either you complete a climb and are a success, or you fail to climb and you're a failure. And as a climber, that's a pretty bad perspective to have on the sport, right? Because you'll never be happy, because climbing, if you're pushing yourself, you're gonna fall way more than you top out and get to the end. So I tried to encourage him a lot, reminding him of just principles that he and I share as Christians in our worldviews, and say, look, man, like it's your perspective. It needs to be positive in embracing the process, and not just thinking pass fail whether you complete a climb or not. And that took a while. Like, it was a process of a lot of encouragement. I'm really a big fan of encouragement and being positive. But there were some times where he just got on my nerves, and we'd be outside and he's like, I failed again, I suck. And I'm like, all right, that's it. Grab him by the shoulders, look me in the eye. Climbing is a process, man. Embrace it. And if you make progress and get farther on something that you've been working on than the last time that you worked on it, look at that measure of progress and count that as a win. And don't look at the rest that you didn't complete and look at yourself as a failure, right? And so that to put some time to it, man, it took months. It took months for him to finally start to change his perspective and take these glasses of negativity, throw them aside, put on the positivity glasses and be like, this can be fun, even if I don't complete every single climb, every try. And so once he matured in that sense, oh man, like it was incredible, and his perspective overall just changed. He was positive, and he embraced the sport of climbing for many, many years afterwards. So on the bad days, try to talk to the athletes, see what's really going on. On the bad streaks, there's definitely something going on, and it's just trying to be encouraging and teaching them how to have a better perspective.
Okay. And now, coaches are also athletes yourself. You do a lot of climbing as well. So how do you keep your own attitude in check when you're dealing with an athlete who's continuously having that attitude with you, and your emotions are also rising? You want to snap back at them, but you know that you can't as a coach. How do you keep those in check on those long streaks or on your own bad days?
Man, that's a great question. It's a hard question. I wish I could say I've been perfect on that and never lost it on my athletes, because I've always been able to keep myself in check. That's just not true. And any coach out there knows that usually if you're coaching and it's not your full-time job, well, you're juggling a lot of different things, right? I've got a wife and 3 kids and a full-time job and other things that I do outside of coaching, so my plate's pretty full. And the job that I work at as a military contractor, it's got a lot of particulars to it, so my brain's really engaged, and sometimes when I go to coach, I'm just depleted, you know. And then if I have an athlete who's got an attitude on top of that, and I'm coming in already like close to the edge, it's tough. It really is tough. And for me, really, this kind of gets into, I guess, like worldviews. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like, where do I draw my strength from? What's my foundation for being able to deal with life on a daily basis? Whether that's the high highs or the low lows, right? We got mountaintops and valleys that we all go through in our daily experiences. For me, my worldview as a Christian, my belief in Jesus Christ as my Savior and my strength, man, that's really what enables me personally to be able to take a deep breath and realize that the strength that I need, the wisdom that I need to coach in a situation that's kind of trying, is not just going to come from my own skills or whatever I think I can do on my own. It's a strength I draw from Him that gives me that extra when I just don't have it. And I've seen that over and over and over again. To make it more applicable to everybody who may not embrace that same belief, it's really just connecting to what your foundation is, realizing the situation for what it is. It's not the end of the world. You're going to go to sleep that night and wake up with a new chance the next day. So don't let that situation get blown out of proportion because I'm already kind of on the edge and weak from whatever else has happened that day, right? So having the proper perspective on the situation, taking a deep breath, going back to my roots, my foundation, whatever those are, and letting that dictate my response instead of just acting on emotion on a whim because I'm just tired or hangry or whatever, right? So that's the best way I've found to deal with situations where I'm already kind of redlining, and then on top of that I have an athlete who's got a bad attitude.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
It was great be able to sit down and talk to you about the climbing sport and just how you deal with athlete behavior and your own behavior sometimes.